Welcome to another episode of Marvelous Videos. As you might know, we're a cohort of comic book connoisseurs and aficionados, just like most of you. For today's episode, we'll explore the comic adventures, heroics, and sometimes harrowing events of a group of mutants who are absolute forces of nature from the Marvel Universe. We've curated and drafted a catalog of 15 of the most vicious mutants who boast an arsenal of claws and fangs, like Logan or the Wolverine, the baddest of his kind there ever was and will be. And this is for reasons that clearly need no mentioning, for he is the one who can walk through the scorching flames of 1,000 suns unscathed, even surviving an atomic explosion to shield the vulnerable. However, unlike Logan, these mutants are absolute hematomaniacs. They have no qualms or restraints to throttle their conscience toward a life of compassion or virtues. While Logan dueled against his baser instincts, these 15 mutants plunged headlong into a cesspool of gore and horror to quench their thirst for blood and savagery. Alright then, let us dive into the comic origins of who they are, what made them the monsters we know them to be, and how menacing they are in combat. Let's begin. But before we go into our explanation, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Sabertooth. So the first to grace our list had to be the feral agent of carnage, Sabertooth. He has been amongst the longest standing antagonists in the lore of the X-Men for decades. He also happens to be Logan's arch-nemesis. Despite sharing near identical mutilation, Creed has historically gotten the best of Logan on most occasions, often outwitting him through his evil designs solely for the pleasure he derived from making Logan miserable eternally. Talk about drama and bad blood, the two certainly have been on the cusp of some major upsets, with each time squaring off to settle newer scores. This big bad boy of Marvel has been around for a long time. Victor first appeared in issue 14 of Iron Fist, intended to be a major villain for the superheroes' arcs, but was, however, later introduced as a recurring antagonist in the X-Men series. It can't be ascertained how old this guy exactly is, as he doesn't have a definitive canon timeline for all the appearances he's made in different issues of different comics, TV series, or films. However, there is an explanation for that as well. It's highly probable that the countless amounts of experiments he's undergone have distorted his recollections to a great extent. Nevertheless, regardless of how sullied and varied his origins are, in every recollection, Victor Creed appears to be a sociopathic wildling tearing at those who come close to him. His most potent memories involve him being reprimanded by his father, who was harsh and uncaring. His father had him tied to chains in the basement, which Victor brutally broke free from to claim his first head, his own father's. This is contradicted by another faint recollection where his mutation manifests as he murders his pediatrician in cold blood at the age of 9. Over the years, Victor has collaborated with quite a number of villainous organizations. However, his most prominent affiliation has been to the infamous government-run clandestine weapons program, Weapon X, known for committing heinous experiments on innocent mutant lives. He also goes on to have intermittent spells of romantic entanglement with Mystique, where the two eventually bear a child, the notorious Graydon, who later grows up to create the Friends of Humanity with the agenda of launching a cleansing of mutants. He met his fate at the hands of Mystique. Over the years, Creed has been featured in a range of animated series, movies, and games. Creed is a towering menace who boasts a gigantic mane and claws as fierce as an elite lion. His instincts and senses surpass the fiercest of stalkers in the wilderness, and his strength seldom has a match. He has almost never lost a fight to Logan without outclassing him first. This is enough to tell how capable an adversary he can be. His heightened senses enable him to see clearly in the dark like cats. His eyesight goes well beyond the average human limitations, extending into the ultraviolet and infrared substratum of the spectrum. He's also earned the title Slasher in news reports for leaving behind bloody entrails of those he had killed. Romulus. For number 2, we've picked Romulus. Among all the other mutants exhibiting lupine ferocity and cunning, he is the most cunning, and perhaps the most devilish of them all. He is the patriarch, or the alpha, of every major lupine mutant, and is probably the only being in existence to strike terror in the heart of Victor Creed at just the mention of his name. Romulus appears as a character who has always been shrouded in mystery for the most part. It was Romulus who, as we come to know, has been the creator of the Weapon X program, which is, in essence, his brainchild, a project that, as we learn later, was a ploy to create a superior species through selective breeding and genetic augmentation. According to him, Romulus is amongst the very first of his species, the Lupus sapiens, a species of humans who, as he professes, has purportedly evolved not from apes, but from wolves. He has been walking the earth since prehistoric times. As per his claims, he was also the leader of a barbarian faction who eventually rose to prominence, ascending the throne as a ruthless Roman emperor, who would organize contests between lupines in gladiator arenas, as we see in one of Logan's recurring dreams, where he is coerced to spectate a bloody battle between two lupines, ending in the demise of a blonde-headed lupine. It was revealed later that Romulus had always been the one behind these recurring visions, pushing Logan to the brink of chaos and insanity throughout his life. Romulus has an impeccable genetic mutation and mockingly challenges and flouts the expertise of Professor X and Mr. Sinister by referring to them as fools who stumble around in the dark, trying to understand genetics. He proved his mettle by eradicating Sabertooth's humanity and impulses, reducing him to an animal incapable of thinking, which eventually led to his decapitation by Logan. Romulus also stripped away the human attributes of Feral and Thorn by reverting them to their feline forms entirely. While much of his abilities are unknown, as he basks in the shadows as a master manipulator and puppeteer, he has caused a great deal of pain and misery to Wolverine through recurring visions of torment, often pushing him over the edge to commit acts of terrible monstrosity, essentially trapping him in a vicious cycle of guilt and shame. Despite his subterfuge and insistence on operating from the shadows, Romulus has been drawn out into the open to trade blows with Logan. In these encounters, we see that he's indeed a formidable lupine who, in addition to superhuman strength, agility, and senses, is also psionic and possesses unique telepathic abilities, by virtue of which he can bend his enemies to his will by creating illusions, as he did with Logan. However, the potency of his psionic feats is far less than that of Professor X. Later, this was debunked when it was revealed that Romulus had, in fact, invoked the aid of another mutant who possessed telepathy and teleportation abilities. Regardless of his deceit and guile, Romulus is an excellent combatant and tactician whose musculature far exceeds that of an ordinary human, and he does not flail or exhibit weaknesses like one. X-23. For number 3, we have chosen X-23. Her origin can be traced back to the miniseries released in 2004 titled X-23 Innocence Lost. X-23, or Laura, was created from damaged DNA of Logan as a product of the Facility, an organization that essentially attempts to recreate Weapon X by sourcing mutant samples to train and indoctrinate them as feral puppets at their behest, who would serve the sole purpose of furthering their interests, which includes the extermination of other mutants. X-23 comes into being when the expertise of a renowned geneticist called Sarah Kinney takes charge of the helm at the Facility to assist the organization by promising them clones from harvested DNA samples of mutants. Sarah, however, soon hits a dead end when her efforts fail, as the sample from Logan's DNA is damaged beyond recovery. She then defies the command of the Facility. She duplicates the chromosome to successfully create a feasible specimen that, after 9 months, springs into life to become Weapon X, or Laura. From an early age, she was exposed to violence and abuse. She was treated as a creature being trained in captivity who would be set out into the world when the time was ripe as a weapon of mass killing or destruction. Sarah, however, made every effort to nurture human emotions and responses in her. She possibly has one of the most horrific backstories in the X-Men series. After being forced to participate and butcher in a series of operations led by the Facility, Sarah decides to liberate her from the jaws of torment and horror by setting her free. However, in a tragic turn of events, Laura kills Sarah, who is laced with the trigger scent as part of Rice's cruel ploy to get back at Sarah. As Sarah lies still on the snow, drawing her last breath, she gives X-23 her name, Laura, and declares herself as her mother. As most of us have seen in the standalone film released in 2017, X-23 is a skilled combatant and has inherited her father's feral nature, which, once she taps into, leaves a bloody trail behind. While she does not boast feats of superhuman strength, she is quite agile, perhaps faster than Logan, as he admittedly makes a note of. Laura is also highly skilled in espionage and martial arts. She also has a profound knowledge base in anatomy, thereby making her an an expert in torture. She has 6 retractable claws, 2 of which protrude from her feet. Being close to Wolverine, she shares his weaknesses as much as she shares his strengths in healing and ferocity. Like other lupines, her healing can be meddled with and taxed as well. For instance, through carborundum poisoning or the Muramasa blade, which can slow down the healing by a considerable extent, rendering the individual susceptible for a long time. Dawan. Dawan makes his maiden appearance in issue number 10 of X-Men Origins. Dawan is probably the only one who can vicariously match Victor Creed's feral rage and cunning. Dawan was Logan's long-lost child who was torn from Itsu, his mother's womb, by Romulus. Dawan had a grueling childhood, wherein he was often bullied for his mixed ancestry and heritage. Dawan, as a matter of fact, is a derogatory slur that he was called for his mixed racial lineage. From an early age, he was steeped in abuse and violence that he had to resort to as a means to cope with the pain and torment of losing his mother at birth and his desolation. Dawan's feral instincts manifested when he killed the child of his adoptive parents, fearing he might be abandoned again. He then, in his defense, killed Natsumi. He rejected his name Akihiro and embraced the name Dawan, which would serve as a constant reminder for him to harbor no compassion for the world and to harness sheer fury and wreak havoc upon those who would stand in his way. Dawan is an untamable beast, with the exception of Romulus, to whom he swears allegiance as a paternal figure. But that's until he learns the truth about Romulus's deeds, after which he thirsts for his blood. The Prowler was also dubbed the Dark Wolverine when he joined the Dark Avengers. Unlike Logan, Dawan has no qualms about killing. He is a Prowler, so set in his twisted ways that there is almost no hope for redemption despite Logan's efforts to steer him to the path of light. Everyone is either a liability or a means for him to further his ambition. He is also extremely agile and highly efficient in combat. He's quite literally Logan's spitting image when he's in action. However, there are a number of ways in which almost no lupine can match his repertoire of feats and machinations. His control over pheromones can seep into anyone's perceptions and cloud their judgments, which is why he always seemed to be miles ahead of others around him. He can manipulate anyone to do his bidding, including even the mightiest of gods. His arsenal of weaponry features an adamantium katana and the hell cycle that is imbued with the flames of hell. However, his greatest enhancement came when he had a splinter of the Muramasa blade, grafted to his claws by the Tinkerer. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson appears for the first time in issue number 1 of Ultimate X in 2010. He's the son of Logan and Magna Lensher. Jimmy led a fairly ordinary life, as opposed to most lupines who had a turbulent childhood. He was entrusted to the care and stewardship of James and Heather Hudson when Logan appeared on their doorstep one night when it poured down with rain heavily. Jimmy eventually grew up and adopted their parentage and family name as their son. His mutation comes into play for the first time when he crashes his car and wrecks it in a race. However, to everyone's surprise, he makes it out alive from a fatal encounter, with his nearly decimated body bent out of shape, bones shattered. He healed instantly and recovered his features in a matter of seconds. Upon returning home, he discovers the following morning, from a hologram in a box delivered to him, that he is the son of Logan. Logan appears in the projection, urging him to leave his past behind and to embrace the Hudsons, who have been endearing to the boy in distress. Jimmy soon begins wondering what other features he has in common with his father. His claws begin to emerge with a snicked as bony enmeshments, which are soon encapsulated by a naturally metallic covering. He is, at present, a member of the X-Men Blue in Earth 616, the only surviving core reality that exists after the Secret Wars. It's expected that he, too, will don his father's mantle to carry forward the legacy of Wolverine, his now-deceased father Logan, in a great many events of cosmic importance. As Logan's son, he so far has been seen to possess all his father's abilities. His stints aren't many, but he has come to collaborate with Jean Grey under the alias of Karen Grant and Kitty Pryde to track down fellow mutants and protect their safety. Remis. At number 4, we have Remis. Remis is an absolute menace that emerges from an alternate timeline in the future. He appeared for the first time in issue number 1 of X-Men Battle of the Atom, under the guise of an older Kitty Pryde from the future. Remis is the mutant child of Logan and Mystique. Now, even the sound of that rings the toll of an insidious nightmare. You certainly wouldn't want to rub him the wrong way or have him as a foe. He's unreasonably gifted as a mutant. Besides inheriting the choicest of traits from his parents' mutation, his mutation has blessed caused him to hoard a few tricks up his sleeves that make him a force to be reckoned with. For instance, phasing, which neither Logan nor Mystique possessed. Remis is an extraordinary shapeshifter, and one can reasonably deduce him to have an edge over his mother, Mystique, when it comes to covering trails with perfection. So much so that Logan couldn't catch a whiff by picking up on the smell that he was, in fact, in disguise. As remarked by Chimera, Remis is by far the best shapeshifter she has traded fists with. He is a far better shifter than Mystique. Besides shifting, Remis also has enhanced senses of smell and sight. Like Logan, he also has 12-inch retractable claws of bone. He is a vicious perpetrator who wouldn't stop at anything until his designs see the light of day. Remis killed his own mother, Mystique, and operated under her guise for a while until his half-brother, Charles Xavier II, tracked him down, who too had been pining to kill Mystique. The two joined forces, realizing they were related, and formed the Brotherhood in the future. Remis's nefarious schemes involved a complete effacement of humans off the face of the earth, much like Eric or Magneto before him. To set his plans into motion, he too wouldn't budge or stray from his path, regardless of what may come. Feral, aka Maria Calasantos, as the name suggests, is the most feral of all those born with an excess of feral instincts as part of their mutation. Feral has never taken to obeying very well, and for nearly the entirety of her torrid existence, she's usually sought to crush everyone who has ever been in a position of authority dictating her actions. Feral was born in New York to an abusive household where she was routinely subjected to violence and vile, horrific abuse perpetrated by her father, who eventually left them to fend for themselves, mired in debt. The early onset of Maria's mutation made things worse for her. Contrary to her sister Thorn, who was another feral and would deal with her mutation by hiding herself away from everyone, Maria found herself steeped in the feral ways, as opposed to her sister. Her mutation developed much faster, albeit still mentally, as their transmutation wouldn't be complete until the two sisters retreated into the sewers to seek refuge with the Morlocks. As days passed, her rage grew beyond control. She was showing signs of a highly advanced feral with her acute sense of hearing and smell. Entrenched in misery that was further aggravated by her mutation, she burst forth into a berserker rage when her sister was attacked by Bellinger, who their mother had fallen in love with. She completely let herself loose and, in a fury of rage, tore Bellinger into shreds. It didn't take long for their mother, Mrs. Calasantos, to catch wind of what had transpired. She showed more remorse for Bellinger than her daughters, since she now had no one to bring her fresh supplies of drugs. Enraged and delirious, their mother kills Maria's pet pigeons on the roof. This leads to a terrible sight, as these pigeons were Maria's only friends, whom she loved the most. Maria kills her mother by unleashing her wrath upon her in a fashion that can rival even Logan's feral rage. Over the years, Maria has collaborated with X-Force and the MLF, or the Mutant Liberation Front. Maria was seldom motivated by strong ideals for change, but by her own agendas of safety, to find a way to sink further into her ends to fuel and serve her feral impulses. This changed, however, when she was inoculated against and cured of the deadly legacy virus. She began to reflect on her life and sought redemption when she joined the X Corporation in its Mumbai branch, where she saved Charles Xavier from an attempt made on his life by Lysandra, who mistook Xavier for his deranged twin sister, Cassandra Nova. After the events of M-Day, Maria and her sister Thorn were rendered powerless and stripped of their X gene. Maria tragically met her fate at the hands of Sabertooth, who had his cognitive faculties and acumen to act as a human removed by Romulus. However, in the events of Necrosha, we see her resurrection alongside other mutants from the dead. Feral is highly competent in both unarmed and armed combat. She's extremely sly and would resort to any means to do things her way. Apart from having enhanced strength and senses, she has fangs and claws that can easily slice through bones and some metals. She also has a hypertensile tail, which means she's capable of using it to her advantage to perform tasks that do not require superior motor skills. Wolfsbane, or Rain Sinclair, is one of the longest-standing characters in the world of X-Men. Over the years, her arcs have gone through some major upheavals, leading her to dubious frays that eventually led her to be at odds with herself, in solitude and in dissonance intermittently, much like Logan. Unlike other feral mutants, Rain was a lycanthrope, which means that when her feral mutation manifests, she transforms into a wolf. Being a lycanthrope means that she can still retain her human faculties and instincts upon transformation, mutation, and her transformation is not incumbent on specific triggers or stimuli. She needs to redirect her impulses upon detecting danger, which in turn translates into her transformation. Wolfsbane is one of the first New Mutants who brought Professor X out of retirement to start teaching again at the Xavier Institute. Rain is highly skilled in battle tactics and combat. Rain started out as a guilt-ridden, introverted teenager who was shamed for her parentage when she was a ward of the church. At the age of 14, a big revelation dawned upon her when her mutation manifested for the first time, and she transformed into a wolf. She was chased off into the forest by the Reverend Father and his band of hunters, who sought to bring her in to purge her of her demonic possession by burning her at the stake. She was then taken under the care of Moira McTaggart, who eventually adopted her to be her child. Wolfsbane has made multiple appearances, including in the New Mutants, X-Men Deluxe, Titans, and X-Factor. She also made her maiden media appearance with the release of the live-action movie The New Mutants, where she was played by Maisie Williams. Rain has had an odious life, where, for the most part, she couldn't come to terms with her mutation, which is due to her faith and conditioning from her time spent under the tutelage of Reverend Cray. To make matters worse, she would always lose those whom she grew close to. Regardless, she has played seminal roles in the events of X-Factor and even had a brief stint with the Excalibur upon returning to Scotland, where she fought the Brotherhood led by Mystique to avenge Moira's death. The carnage ended in favor of the Brotherhood, with Mystique shooting her with the neutralizer, which altered her mutation and left her disenfranchised as she lost her former strength and skills to regenerate and transform as a lycanthrope. Her powers were restored later by Elixir, a mutant who is capable of restructuring biological composition and genetics. She also shares a unique telepathic bond with Danielle Moonstar, as the two would always implicitly sense if the other was in trouble. Her transformations are varied and unique. She can either transform herself into a creature resembling half man and half wolf, much like a werewolf, or a huge direwolf. Being a feral, she also has the ability to regenerate and can read into others' intentions from their heat signatures and scents. Wildchild. Kyle Gibney, aka Wildchild, was born with pronounced features that would be the envy of any man. However, his beauty begins to fade when, owing to his feral mutation, he turns into something hideous and fearful with an unnatural temperament, which eventually prompts his parents to throw him out of the house. As he wanders the streets, he's tracked down by the secret Empire, who take him captive to conduct horrific experiments, which permanently alter his mind and appearance and lock him in a state of pure frenzy, given to violence and chaos. He was eventually set free and would undergo a series of drug and hypnotherapy treatments as sanctioned by the H Department of Canada. He was administered a serum that was synthesized by the H Department to cure him of his vicious impulses that could have posed a threat, as they planned to enlist him as part of the Alpha Flight. Over the years, he has partaken in many covert missions with the Alpha Flight, especially during the events of the Infinity War. However, Gibney soon descended into his feral state when he began refusing the serum to register and serve as a part of the X-Factor, assuming his alias, Wildchild, to track down Havoc, who had gone missing. Gibney had to disband X-Factor after some time, and he sank further into a state of degeneration when his mutation spiked. He was inducted into Weapon X, where scientists tampered with his DNA and mutation. This catapulted him into a further state of feral features, but he also ended up being more intelligent than ever before. Wildchild is a skilled combatant who has received training in martial arts from none other than Wolverine and Special Ops from his time with the Alpha Flight. He has very sharp fangs and claws that protract from his feet and fingers. They are sharp enough to cut through most materials of wood, high-tensile fiber, and some metals. He also heals and regenerates at a rate that is remarkably fast than an average human. He also ended up mute for some time after sustaining multiple injuries from engaging in combat with Sabertooth. Thorn, aka Lucia Colasantos, was Farrell's estranged sister. Contrary to her sister Maria, who had grown into a cold and indifferent psychopath, she was protective and gentle, and from an early age would look out for her family. The Ailuronthrope showed delayed signs of mutation, unlike her sister. This is in part due to her sense of responsibility to be the caregiver and the nurturer in her household when their abusive father abandoned them. Lucia always had her suspicions about the bizarre yet tragic deaths of her brother Mateo and her sister Carolina, who we come to know later was thrown off the stairs by Farrell. As for Mateo, Maria witnessed him die when he slipped off the roof and couldn't pull himself up. Maria fell prey to Harry Bellinger, who moved in with their mother after their father's abandonment. Despite the girl being a mere pubescent, the lecher would make foul advances while their mother would pass out unconscious. Farrell eventually kills Bellinger to save her. However, this led to a violent confrontation with their mother, who also met a similar fate at the hands of Farrell. Their murders forced them into hiding in the tunnels, where they eventually found a way to flip the script and evade society's law and order to join the mutant band of outcasts called the Morlocks. Despite several attempts made to oust them, the Morlocks were a close-knit community of outcasts driven by a passionate hatred for society. Thorn had to part ways with Farrell when the tunnels were flooded. Farrell found herself a new life and place with the X-Force, but the two sisters found themselves against each other when, years later, a war broke out between the X-Force and the Morlocks, who were brought into confidence to join forces with the Brotherhood of Evil mutants. The X-Force, who were far more superior and battle-hardened, emerged victorious. The two sisters, Farrell and Thorn, both fought violently, but the latter lost the battle and was hurled back into the tunnels. This defeat forced the surviving Morlocks into hiding. Thorn eventually managed to find them by performing the Morlock ritual, only to be told by her ally and confidant, Sarah, that Thorn must look out for herself, but she promises to return. Despite receiving offers to join the X-Force, Lucia stays true to her course and her identity. She believes that her place is in the sewers. While lacking the cunning ferocity of her sister, she is a capable mutant who, owing to her mutation, possessed fangs and claws alongside enhanced senses that allowed her to see in complete darkness and with superhuman reflexes. Wolf Cub. Wolf Cub, aka Nicholas Greason, is another feral mutant, a gamma-type mutant who is a lycanthrope. The character debuted in issue 1 of Chamber. Contrary to Wolfsbane, his lycanthropic state is permanent once the manifestation onset. While he may not match up in strength or skills to other ferals, Wolf Cub has still been instrumental in many of the canon events of the X-Men saga. Nick's powers began to manifest much earlier than usual, as evidenced in other mutants, where the onset would not begin to manifest before puberty. Nick lost his parents early as a child and was targeted by two members of the Anti-Mutants who wanted to dispatch him for being a mutant. Fortunately, Cyclops and Decibel intervened at the right moment and saved his life. The two then brought him to the Xavier Institute. Initially, Nick found it overwhelming to fit in, but he had his breakthrough when Husk broke the ice. From then on, he found himself a new home among fellow mutants. However, he would still face challenges navigating his emotions due to his feral instincts. He was also taken in by the Exiles, a dominant pack of mutants who hopped across time. Their mission was to induct him as one of their own by recruiting him. Despite being in hiding, he is eventually tracked down by them, who then persuade him to unleash his feral instincts and turn Nick against Rogue, whom he attacks. He eventually fights their influence by thwarting his feral urges and devising a plan to lure them into a trap. He finds the other Exiles and X-Men, warns them of his plot, and successfully defeats Evil Havoc and the dominant species and drives them off. In X-Men, we see him being placed on the Paragon training squad led by Wolfsbane. He was also one of the few mutants who were not depowered in the events of M-Day when Wanda stripped nearly the entire mutant population of their powers. In Young X-Men, he's killed in battle by Pierce, but not without uttering his iconic last phrase, "X-Men don't kill," or "do not kill Pierce." He was resurrected and brought back to life in the creation of Krakoa, where he's being recruited by a new team of Dark Riders. Native. Native is perhaps the most enigmatic and elusive of ferals who appears in issue 13 of Wolverine. She is a feral of similar stature and abilities as Wolverine with 3 retractable claws. We know very little about the origins of Native, except that she was kept captive as a test subject for Weapon X to be experimented upon. The scientists often referred to her codename Feral. When Wolverine escaped from their clutches, so did she. The two eventually chance upon each other and spend some time together on the hills of British Columbia in a cabin. The two grew closer and became romantically intertwined in the time spent together. Logan, however, leaves her for reasons unknown. Weapon X eventually tracks Native down and hires Sabertooth to retrieve her. Sabertooth finds her, only to be bested by her, who eventually flees. The spiteful Sabertooth hatches an evil scheme to draw her out by manipulating Wolverine into finding her. The two lovers reunite once again and share a brief romantic interlude. Meanwhile, Weapon X X locates them, captures Native, and immobilizes Wolverine. Dr. Vapor operates on her to remove genetic material from her body, but discovers that she is pregnant. Wolverine eventually finds his way to the facility, where he kills the evil doctor and escapes with the Native. However, Sabertooth, who is set in his designs, tracks the couple down, defeats Wolverine, and kills her. We see that Logan, who fell unconscious from the fight, wakes up and tracks her corpse, bearing a letter from Victor which reads, "I did you a favor, you little runt. You can thank me later." We see Logan breaking into tears. The entirety of her existence is called into question, and her presence ceases to exist upon speculation, as she appears only in Logan's recollection from when he escaped the Weapon X facility, where he got his adamantium bones from. Considering the idea that Wolverine's memories have been tampered with by Romulus, this may well be another memory implant. Wild Thing. The next in our list of feral metahumans is Wild Thing, aka Rena Logan, who is the child of Logan and Elektra from an alternate reality in the MC2 universe. She first appears in issue 5 of J2 Comics, released and published in 1999. Her life was more pleasant and relatively normal compared to other ferals whose origins were drenched in bloody horrors. We see that both Wolverine and Elektra are leading a life of domestic bliss after having led an active superhero lifestyle. Rena takes after her father in her demeanor and temperament. She quickly earns the disdain of her fellow schoolmates and a reputation for notoriety due to her temper and harsh words. Regardless, she still found her tribe, with whom she would get along quite well. Rena, from an early age, had a fervor for being a superhero and assumed the alias Wild Thing when she became one. She is highly skilled in martial arts and combat, which is no surprise as she was trained by Wolverine and Elektra, two of the most adept combatants in Marvel. Being a feral, she has inherited her father's regenerative ability and acute senses, and an enhanced immune system that renders her impervious to toxins and drugs from taking effect, just like her father. However, what makes her special is her psychokinetic claws, resembling Wolverine's claws and Elektra's Psyblades, which are capable of dealing damage at a mental level, similar to the Psyblades of Psylocke. As a matter of fact, Psylocke, who is also her godmother, was quite instrumental in developing her Psyclaws. In the events that unfolded in The Last Hero Standing, Loki captured many of Earth's superheroes, including Logan, her father. It was she who then tracked him down and other heroes to come to their aid and save them. Remis. Remis is the twin sister of the evil geneticist feral mutant Romulus. She was the one who assisted Romulus in all his missions to gain as much power as possible. However, that changes when she comes across Wolverine from afar in the Weapon X facility, where Logan volunteers to have his skeleton laced in adamantium. Remis resisted Romulus, urged him to stop, and stated that she would leave unless Romulus chose not to cease his operation. Romulus didn't, and so she leaves. However, Logan had no recollection of her presence, as this memory was wiped from his mind by Professor Thornton. Remis appears first in the battle between Wolverine and Romulus, where she stabs her brother from behind and incapacitates him to buy Logan some time to heal and recover before passing out. Remis is quite upfront about her fondness for Logan, who would make the most of every occasion to chat with him while making coquettish suggestions and gestures. The two reunite once again in the fight against the Sabertooth clones, where Logan blows up Weapon X's facilities using her blade. The two pursue their love on a beach after chasing Romulus into his fortress in Italy, where Sabertooth blows up the entire place in flames. Remis is one of the oldest ferals who have walked the earth for nearly 2,000 years, and like her brother, she has her legacy etched in Roman mythology. She shares the same mutation as her brother Romulus, and possesses the feral gift of healing and enhanced senses of sight and smell, with one retractable claw on each of her wrists. Saberclaw. Saberclaw, or Hudson Logan, is the son of Wolverine on Earth 982 from an alternate universe, MC2, and is thus the half-brother of Wild Thing, or Rena Logan. Saberclaw is one of the fiercest ferals, surpassing even his father and her sister in strength and endurance. However, he is not nearly as skilled or efficient as Logan in combat. His way of operating significantly varies from Logan's. He relies more on his brutal strength and aims to kill his opponents in the swiftest way possible. We don't know much about where and under whose mentorship he mastered his skills in combat. Saberclaw was an active member of the Revengers, who met their defeat at the hands of the allied forces of the Avengers. Saberclaw was quick to change his allegiance as he chose to assist the Avengers in battle handling Silene, Loki's daughter. Saberclaw's sworn enemies are Spider-Girl and Psylord, for they intervened and defeated him by compromising his plans to frame his sister and get her arrested. He also wears an adamantium sheath that ranges across his arms to his fingers, encasing his claws that further elevate and enhance the damage dealt to his opponents in a fight. Marvelous verdict. Marvel's feral mutants in the X-Men series celebrate a tradition that is steeped in a blend of slasher horror coupled with chaotic subversion of the normal and the conventional. It's a tradition that has delighted fans for decades and will continue to do so in the decades to come. There are no two ways about it. The list of ferals is huge. We've only plucked and curated a list of the sassiest and most vicious ferals who have won the hearts of fans across generations nestled all around the world. Their characters are decidedly more complex, and so are their arcs. Nonetheless, it's promised that there is no dearth of action in their adventures, nor will you find a dull moment in any of the narratives. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.